All right, we're going to start literary essay off here with your new teacher, Mr. Mike. He looks like he could be related to me, but he's going to walk you through an essay written about the short story 11. He's going to walk you through that essay and what parts are in the essay. He's going to say things like, hey, did you notice, right? And just, you can just say, oh yeah, Mr. Mike, I totally noticed that. But look, I want you to see where we're going and what a full literary essay looks like. And then we are going to take a step back after you watch the video with him. And today we're going to work on the intro of a literary essay and what it really looks like. But I think it's really important that you see the full literary essay, how long it is, what the full essay does, why we write them, why they're important. And Mr. Mike is an awesome teacher, and he goes through all of that. So I'm going to piece my screen out here and turn this over to Mr. Mike. Mr. Mike, you there?
I'm Mike, and I'll be teaching alongside your teacher in this writing unit about literary essays. I'm really excited to do so. Let's get started. To be ready for today's session, it might be helpful if you have something that can help you mark up a text, whether it's a pencil or a pen or a highlighter, something of that nature. If you need to pause the video right now to go get those materials, please do so.
That is not something that you need to do, but I wanted to pause here at Mr. Mike's great smile and let you know, just kind of watch what Mr. Mike does with his. You do have the video check on this, so pay close attention to it. I did put the essay in our It's Learning schedule here under step 1, so you can follow along with the essay if you want to, but Mr. Mike will show you all the things that are there, and I think it's really important we learn from him as our expert.
Okay, let's begin. Some of you might remember earlier this year in math, or even in previous years, when your teacher taught you something like, say, multiplying fractions. You probably didn't just start from scratch, forgetting everything you already knew. Instead, you likely first had to think, what do I know about multiplication, and what do I know about fractions? And then you use all of that information to help you. Learning to do something new typically requires all of us to draw on everything that we already know and to transfer that thing that we already know to a new situation. In this way, our understanding builds as you attach new learning onto the things that you already know. Today, we're launching a new unit. You'll be crafting literary essays. This is the kind of writing that schools really care about, but it's also the kind of writing that people who like to think deeply about text care about too. And here's the thing about literary essay. Students who not only can write well, can also read well. Because to write a good literary essay, a writer needs to have deep, thoughtful ideas about a text. And the writer needs to be able to use writing to put an idea, not just an experience, onto the page. That is tricky, but I'm here to help. Writing literary essays is big work. Middle school and high school students do it all of the time. But luckily, you aren't alone and you aren't starting from scratch. I've been talking to some fourth grade teachers, some of your fourth grade teachers, and it turns out that you already know quite a bit about writing literary essays. So, to show me what you already know, your fourth grade teachers started talking about and pulling out these mentor essays that fourth graders were writing and studying last year. And so I've borrowed a few of those essays that you may have studied last year too for today, so that you can study them to remind yourself of everything you already know about essay writing. Are you game? Let's do it. So the question that we'll be researching today is, what makes a literary essay? What exactly are the parts, and how do they fit together? So I'm hoping that we can study this essay that I have. It's called 11, and it's written by Adam. I'm hoping we can study it like an architect might study a building. Architects construct buildings, and when they look at other buildings, they study how those are made and how the building parts go together to make a whole structure. Will you study this essay with me like an architect, thinking about our inquiry question, what are the big parts of literary essays? Jot some notes as we go, and annotate the text with what you've noticed. and draw boxes and arrows around it to help keep track. I'll pause along the way so that we can share our thinking. And here it is. Let me read, and let's think to ourselves, what makes this a literary essay? What are its parts, and how do they go together? 11, by Adam. In literature, authors write a lot about one character being upset and taking it out on another person. Sandra Cisneros' essay 11 is about a girl named Rachel who's mistreated by her teacher and in return mistreats her classmates. Okay, let's just pause right here at this part. I bet you have some ideas about what might be this part. Take a moment to pause the screen, to study it. What would you call this? What is this part, and how does it fit with the literary essay? Aha, that's right. I bet many of you know and thought and said that literary essays start with an introduction. Let's take a closer look at the introduction. What do you notice about these parts? What are some things that you might be seeing in this introduction? I'll just highlight a few things. What do you see? Pause the video to think and to jot on your own copy of this essay. All right, let's come back. I bet you noticed a bunch of things that make for a good introduction in a literary essay. And some of you probably noticed things like it hooks the reader and explains why it's important or significant. It names the author in the text, right? Sandra Cisneros 11, and it states the claim, some supports. We have our claim here. Rachel is mistreated by her teacher and in return mistreats her classmates. Okay, let's take a look at this next chunk of the essay. See if we can name the big parts and then look under the little parts and see what they are too. I'll read it out loud as you can follow along and annotate if you like. Here we go. Rachel is mistreated by her teacher. Mrs. Price finds an old ugly sweater in the coat room and forces Rachel to put it on. Rachel says, "That's not mine." But Mrs. Price moves on to the next math problem without understanding Rachel, saying, "Of course it's yours." Mrs. Price says, "I remember you wearing it once." This is mistreatment because Mrs. Price isn't respecting Rachel. Mrs. Price doesn't care about what Rachel has to say. Later, right before the bell rings, Mrs. Price pretends as if everything's okay, ignoring the real pain Rachel is feeling. In return for Mrs. Price mistreating Rachel, Rachel then goes on to mistreat her classmates. Rachel thinks of her classmates in a derogatory way. An example of this is when Rachel commented, "Maybe because I'm skinny, maybe because she doesn't like me, that stupid Sylvia Saldivar says, I think it belongs to Rachel." Then, later on, Rachel comments, "But the worst part about it is right before the bell, that stupid Phyllis Lopez, who is even dumber than Sylvia Saldivar, says that she remembers the sweater is hers." In both these examples, Rachel is calling her classmates dumb and stupid. She's doing this in her mind, but her feelings probably affect her actions too. Sandra Cisneros also shows Rachel mistreating her classmates when Rachel describes the sweater as smelling like cottage cheese and all itchy and full of germs that aren't even mine. This shows that Rachel is disgusted with wearing her classmates' clothes. The sweater, it turns out, belongs to Phyllis, and she must feel awful seeing Rachel cry over the fact that Rachel needs to wear her sweater. So I'm betting, readers, that you're noticing something and you know some things about this part too, right? These two paragraphs. And those of you who remember from years past know that these we call body paragraphs. I'll take a moment to pause the screen and pause your thinking. And what are some things you're noticing in the body paragraphs? What makes these literary essays? What are the things? I'll highlight some things that I see. See if you can give it a name based on what you remember. Are you thinking alongside me as I highlight these things? What are you thinking? I know you've written literary essays before, and I bet you saw some of these things. That at the beginning of each body paragraph, the author will state the claim in one's support, right? Whether Rachel is being mistreated or Rachel's mistreating others, gives evidence to show that the support is true. We saw lots of things like quotes right, from the text to show that that's true. Includes explanations of the evidence after the quotes. Adam, the author of this essay, says a little bit of why, and also uses transitions to move between parts, right? So those are all aspects of what are in body paragraphs. So let's take a look at this last one. I bet you already know what this last one is called. You've done it so many times before in your other literary essays. We know that it ends with a conclusion, right? So as we look at this last paragraph, let's name what are the parts of this conclusion. Let's see what they are. Okay, I'll read it out loud. This story teaches me that when someone mistreats a person, that person needs to protest so that they don't pass on their fury to other people. When someone gets mad at me, I sometimes don't protest and sometimes pass it on to someone else. Sandra Cisneros in 11 teaches me to speak up. Okay, take a moment to pause the video and see if you can name some things out loud to the screen or with somebody next to you that you're seeing in this essay. All right, let's come back together. I bet you noticed some things like this, that the author restates the claim and supports, right? We see that Adam restates his claim of the character being mistreated. Makes the reader think. He's doing some things to make us think, you know, like thinking about standing up for yourself so you're not passing on sort of negative feelings to others. And then he ties the whole essay together by mentioning some things that he learns that he can pass on into his own life. Writers, I just know that thinking alongside me, you've already noticed and recalled a ton about literary essays. You have been noticing and marking things up about the big parts of this essay and how they fit together, things that you've learned how to do when you were a fourth grader last year. This kind of close, careful looking can help you recall what you already know, which will help you as you take on these more challenging literary essays. When you head off today, your teacher and I have prepared a little folder of literary essays that we've borrowed from fourth grade teachers for all of you to read. You'll want to read them with your question in mind, marking them up to capture what you're noticing about the big parts of each essay and how they fit together. You can design your own system to help you, annotating in the margins, using sticky notes or flags or highlighters, or some other system that you choose. As you push yourself to closely read and look, and as you're doing all of this, the same way you'll be doing as an architect might be studying a building. Get that big picture, but also study the small parts so that you can make sense about each essay is held together. Have a great time marking up and annotating essays, writers. Off you go. Hi, writers. I'm Mike,